Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this week's edition of the Lasching Out podcast on the Nittany Sports Now Network. My name is Jarrod Prugar, and I'm joined by NSN's Joe Smeltzer, as well as our good friend Kevin Quigley. Gentlemen, Penn State thoroughly dominated Kent State in a way that we haven't really seen since the 1940s as far as the yardage is concerned. They set records left and right, and they got out of there with a win. I think all in all, Saturday was a great game. There's a lot you can take away from a game like that, despite the inferior opponent and the fact that, it was a 56-0 game.
Yeah, and I think 56 is a it's a deceitful number. The Bo Prabula interception on drive one probably took easily 7 points off the board, and then Drew Allar plays one series in the second half and gets pulled at 35-0. That's a game that starters play in. We're looking 86 points somewhere in there. I guess that's not divisible by 7, but you get the picture. That's a big number waiting to happen against Kent State. I think the rest of the country knows who Tyler Warren is now. I think I'm on record as last year saying that he was probably the better tight end than Theo Johnson, and Tyler Warren is here to stay, showing the Wildcat, showing passing out the Wildcat too, giving more teams more things to look at, more things to study on film, more things to prepare for. Not much you can ask for more on the offensive side and defensive side. I don't have the number in front of me, but the number of people who took a defensive snap yesterday, guys who with very little experience. Penn State's short in the secondary, as we're going to talk about later. And you got guys with experience from the jump. And yeah, sure, Kent State's quarterback's out on second play of the game, whatever it was. But that's the game that we needed Penn State to play yesterday, and that's the game that we got.
Yeah, absolutely, Kevin. And I'm glad you mentioned the amount of players getting snaps because you talked about Tyler Warren, and obviously they don't need to be playing Kent State for him to get a lot of snaps. He's going to play every single week. But Luke Reynolds, I think, has the potential, and this is with all due respect to Tyler Warren, Brenton Strange, Theo Johnson, etc. But he could end up being the best tight end of the James Franklin era. I don't think there's any doubt that he has that upside. And that big catch late in the game, that could go down as his first signature play at Penn State. That was some big time stuff. And another true freshman talking about the defensive side is Max Granville. That's a guy that you're going to hear it said a lot throughout the season, but he really should be in high school right now. He reclassified and he ends up playing, I think it was the second series of the game. And I think I read a stat that he got 3 pressures within his first 4 snaps, and that's pretty solid. And then he ended up forcing a fumble that another freshman, Antoine Belgrave Shorter, ran in for a touchdown. Unfortunately, that play ended up not standing. It ended up being just an incomplete pass. But yeah, we saw a lot of good, obviously, in a 56-0 win, both from the starters. Drew Allar looked great. And also, as you mentioned, the guys that we aren't gonna see too much more of this year, probably, but could see a lot of down the road.
Kevin, you mentioned the score. And so many times this week, I was brought back to this quote by Theodore Roosevelt: "Comparison is the thief of joy." People kept comparing Kent State's loss to Tennessee, where they just got boat raced 71-0. Tennessee put up 65 in the first half. When we mentioned on our preview, how we wanted to see Penn State put up some serious points. But when you, like the quote says, comparison is a thief of joy. When you compare, you're just kind of setting yourself up for failure, right? I mean, obviously Penn State put up 56, which is good. Lots of people played, but Kevin, you're right. They probably should have scored a little bit more, but at the end of the day, they scored 56 points. They dominated the entire game, and it's just one of those situations where they didn't let Kent State get to even 70 yards of total offense. So, yeah, the score could have been a lot better, but at the same time, it was a pretty damn dominant day.
Yeah, and if you look, I think 3 touchdowns in 5 minutes and 34 seconds in the second quarter. A little bit of a sleepy start. I think we can say they had 2 games, the bye week, and now we're in the third game of the season, the 4th week. The schedule is kind of stop and start. I think we kind of chalk it up to that. Like, they were just out there trying stuff. What works? What doesn't work? And then they finally figured out how they were going to manage their they finally figured out how they were going to manage their play, and they figured it out. 3 touchdowns and 534. That is about as explosive of an offense you can be, regardless of who you're playing against. Like, you're scoring quick 3 times, and your defense gets a 3 and out both times. Like, that's hard to do. Everything's firing on all cylinders, and it's Penn State. Yeah, they're 0-3. Yeah, they got boat raced last week against Tennessee. They've been boat raced in every game that they've played. They've lost to St. Francis on the FCS level. They are still D1 college athletes. We still looked at other games like Bowling Green. Those are high-level D1 athletes. We've said time and time again, the transfer portal is leveling out college football. Like, there are good players on Kent State's team. Their quarterback gets hurt early. That's going to hurt. That's going to hurt.
Femur.
Yeah, that's a disgusting injury. I'm sure
Joe, as soon as that happened, that he broke his leg. That's the way that it looked in the press.
Could you guys hear it?
No.
I've heard somebody.
It was ugly, though.
I've heard somebody snap their tibia, and it is a sound I will never not forget. But I mean, to put up that kind of offensive performance is to close out the first half 3 and 534 is just so impressive. And then the long pass to Amari Evans, this gives me hope for Kotelnicki's offense, and this is offense that will work no matter the defense. I think it was it Fleming? No, Trey runs a post corner as the outside receiver. So Trey runs, and Amari's kind of trailing behind him. Trey cuts towards the corner, and they're in Tampa 2 or 2 deep safety look. Safety commits inside to follow Trey on the post. Trey then goes back out on the corner, but because the safety bit so hard inside, Omari flies right by him and really Drew underthrew that ball like 5 or 6 yards. I mean, big ball, but it was still a little bit underthrown. But that's open 8 days a week because they got the 2 deep safety that they want. The 2 deep safety look that they wanted, and they called the exact route concept to beat 2 deep safety. And it just, so that gives me hope to like what Andy Kotelnicki is scheming up. Like, doesn't matter if it's Ohio State defense or Kent State defense. That's a play that works. That's a play that is going to be open later in the season. And you can't really scheme against that because you're overwhelming a single safety on that side of the field. And they have the athletes to do it now at wide receiver, and they're playing them. What a concept.
Yeah, and a guy, Kevin, you've been high on for a while, I think, is Amari Evans, and he's showing up, and Penn State is using him right. And after the game, James Franklin was asked about him and how he was basically an afterthought for most of last season. And then Mike Yurcich gets fired. He has that big catch, against Rutgers, a big catch against Michigan State, and now he's had at least one big play in all 3 of Penn State's games so far. He's averaging, I think, over 20 yards a reception on the season, and he could be a difference maker. And we still don't. We're pretty sure Trey Wallace is our number 1 guy still, even though he really hasn't followed up that West Virginia game. But Evans is definitely, I think he's the number 2 guy right now, and that's an explosive player, and I think that's really a great example of how different this offense is really under Andy Kotelnicki.
The beauty of Trey Wallace is they haven't needed him to be number 1 guy. They have a multitude of different ways they're going about their business offensively. The vibes are much different. I know I mentioned this before, but the vibes are so much different now this year compared to what they were under Yurcich. Franklin was a lot looser than we've seen him in years past, especially in the press conference yesterday. But just overall, the coaches as well, it seems like Yurcich was just kind of a Debbie Downer that brought the team down, like an energy vampire, if you will. but this is a different team, and I think that's one of the things you can take away, from Kent State. This is still a very basic version of the offense. I don't even think we're beginning to scrape the surface. But now, what you're going to get from this performance is, you're going to go out and see them put up 718 yards, which is almost nearly a half mile of yardage offensively. But you're going to see different formations show up on film now that you kind of have to account for. And it's just one of those things where now, if you're looking at Illinois and Brett Bielema, where, hey, you saw the muddle huddle. Can they do something out of that? Tyler Warren took a couple direct snaps. They lined up with a wing T setup with Katron Allen and Nick Singleton. They set up in a power I as well. So, I mean, there's just so many different things, and they might just simply be window dressing. But if you're a coach, you have to prepare that they're going to run something out of that. We still haven't seen them throw a pass to Drew Allar out of the Allar package, or out of when Bo Prabula is in. And I'm certain that's going to be coming soon. But there's just so many different things you can take away, despite, this game kind of being, not kind of being, but definitely being one-sided.
Can you imagine a Tyler Warren fullback power I formation? Let's say Nick Singleton's in the backfield and Tyler Warren's playing the fullback. A counter play where Nick Singleton looks like he's going right, quick pitch left out to Tyler Warren, and it finds like a wide open Trey Wallace or Amari Evans, because you have two different backs going two different directions. Defense has no idea what it looks. You're in a base run format, like three wide receivers, maybe two tight ends, or one tight end and one running back. Like that formation, oh my gosh, can you imagine? Like that's what you can build off, and you show that because you run Tyler Warren in the Wildcat with the ability to pass. And if I'm a middle linebacker, I don't want to find Tyler Warren in the middle of the hole. I don't want to find Tyler Warren anywhere on the field. The dude's what, 6'5", 260, whatever the heck he is. Like, and he's making one-handed catches on the sidelines, full extension, jumping up and grabbing it. Like, what a game from him. And yeah, Jared, they haven't needed Trey Wallace to be number one wide receiver, and they really didn't have that many yards passing. What was Drew, 16 of 21 against Bowling Green or something like that? Like, they haven't needed to throw the ball. Offensive line looked good, 6.2 yards per carry on the ground. Nick Singleton, Katron Allen, 7.4 and 6 yards per carry against the starting defense with the starting offensive line. Cam Wallace and Quentin Martin, they're in the low threes per yards per carry, but it's backup offensive line. We're deep reserves. There's 3 offensive linemen playing every single position yesterday. Starters didn't play more than 40 snaps. Like, that was a good performance by Penn State.
10 different receivers, 8 different rushers. Those are things that are going to show up on film that you have to prepare for. You have to prepare for when Singleton gets the ball in the backfield. When Tyler Warren is in there, whether he's a threat to throw the ball and run the ball and catch the ball. So, I mean, you have to be able to prepare for that. And games like that, it's a coaching chess match. Because, again, like I mentioned, the film that you put out there, I mean, not only do you get it on the young guys now, right? The Anthony Ivies of the world, the Quentin Martins of the world, which is great. But it's also an opportunity now that you're just one of those situations where, hey, guess what? You got to prepare and plan accordingly for maybe Quentin Martin gets in the game. Katron Allen gets out of the backfield. Just so many different variations of this Penn State offense. And that's going to be a nightmare for opposing coaches, whether they decide to run something like that or not.
Yep. And going back to the West Virginia game, when Trey Wallace said that they had only used maybe a third of the playbook, I think we're starting to kind of see what he meant. We didn't really get to see too much experimenting against Bowling Green because of how the game played out, but with Kent State being the demolition that everybody thought it was going to be, we really were able to see just some more stuff that Andy Kotelnicki has in his offense. And what are we going to see against Illinois? I don't know, but people are excited to find out. And that excitement just did not exist when Mike Yurcich was the offensive coordinator, period.
Yeah, it's a whole new world, and Andy Kotelnicki has done a great job. They're 3-0 through 3 games. That's pretty much all you can ask for going into the start of conference play, and a white out esque environment that they're hoping for. But we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the things that happened in Saturday's game that weren't so great when we come back for the second segment of the Lashing Out podcast on the Nittany Sports Now Network. Welcome back to the second segment of the Lashing Out podcast, the Nittany Sports Now Network. They are Kevin and Joe, and I am Jarrod. Obviously, there are some, not very many, but there were some negative things that happened against Kent State and the Golden Flashes on Saturday. We thought there was going to be a lightning delay. That was a potential day ruiner, but the skies opened up. We got a little bit of a rain shower, but alas, the rain held off, the lightning went away, and they got the game in with no further delay. Obviously, this is simply nitpicking. The penalties were a problem for Penn State. They did suffer a couple injuries that we're going to get to, and obviously they had the one turnover, which was, in fact, just a great play by the Bowling Green player who made the play. So, I mean, that thwarted that first drive, probably ends up a touchdown or at least a field goal. So offensively, that and the 3 and out were probably the two glitches on an otherwise perfect day. But the penalties need cleaned up, and you know the injuries are going to happen, but they're starting to pile up rather quickly for the Nittany Lions.
Yeah, and maybe going into next week we don't use Bo Prabula to throw the ball. Drew Allar went 17 of 21 with an 81% completion percentage. That's pretty good. That's the guy I want throwing the football down the field. Not Bo Prabula on some very predictable, very well sniffed out screen pass. Yeah, the guy made a great play, but Bo did not see the guy rushing to fill the hole. Like, that's a ball you got to not throw or throw into the ground, because that's day one college throw. He's in his third year, right? Red shirt, and then last year and this year. So he's in his third year in college ball. That's a mistake he shouldn't be making. There's a reason he's not the number one quarterback. Drew Allar is the better passer. Let's use Bo Prabula sparingly. I think he's great. Shout out to Drew, because I think Drew did learn from Bo in the offseason on how to run, got a little slimmer, got a little bit more athletic, and he's doing well scrambling. But yeah, you mentioned it, KJ Winston being out. From what I was hearing, it sounds like he's not going to be available for USC. So he's at least out that long. Concerning. AJ Harris was having a really good game early. I don't know if he tweaked something in the bye week. And then maybe they just didn't want to use him and aggravate any sort of injury that he had, or if he actually got hurt in the game. I think that's the big one to look out for, is because AJ Harris is Penn State's best quarterback. They have Cam Miller, they have Elliott Washington, sure, but they need a healthy AJ Harris. So that's where I'm looking at to be the big red flag. I mean, KJ Winston obviously is a big hurt, but I think Penn State's okay at safety. But you lose your best safety and your best cornerback, I think you're struggling.
Yeah, and there were 2 more injuries. Dom DeLuca's wrist is in a cast, and Cam Wallace was carted off the field. Dom DeLuca is not an impact player, but at the same time, you lose KJ Winston, and that really kind of makes it a challenge to run the 4-2-5, which Tom Allen definitely wants to do. I think that's apparent, and without Winston in there, it's really hard to play 5 defensive backs frequently, and a good way to kind of mask that, obviously would be to play a 4-3, but being down a linebacker, when you're already, you've struggled with linebacker depth already in the season. Keon Wiley has been out, since the spring. Tamer Robinson has been banged up. Curry Jackson, a freshman, he's hurt. Losing Dom DeLuca definitely isn't ideal. So, yeah, Dom's not an impact player the way KJ Winston is, but when you lose a guy like that, that's at the very least capable of starting, that's definitely something to keep an eye on, and we'll see what James Franklin says about that in his Monday presser. And then another big injury, and a more serious looking injury, was Cam Wallace. Ended up getting carted off the field, which is obviously a shame since it was a pretty good day for him. I thought he looked really good coming in mop out time, ended up getting his first college touchdown, and then for that day to end with him being carted off the field, definitely not what you want to see. And when you have Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen, the third string running back really doesn't mean a whole lot as far as the here and now goes. But if it could happen to Cam Wallace, it could happen to one of those two guys. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. And B, those guys are going to be gone next year, and you would think that Cam Wallace would have a great chance to get that starting job next season when Penn State has those holes to fill in the running game. And if he's missing an extended period of time, which it definitely looks like that could be a case, that really sets him back for the future, and that kind of thrusts Quentin Martin, you would think, into a more important spot. Maybe they end up having to burn his red shirt. Who knows there? But yeah, DeLuca and Cam Wallace, two guys that I was seeing on social media, Penn State fans kind of brushing it off a little bit, not really seeing them as key players, but with how this year has been, and I was talking with Jarrod about this after the game Saturday, with how this year has been already with injuries, and we're only in late September, you really don't want to see, well, you never want to see injuries, but especially with how things have gone, you don't want to see it pile up any more than it already has. And it piled up a little more Saturday, and it's not something that's going to kill Penn State's season, but it's definitely something worth keeping an eye on going forward.
The beauty of Cam Wallace is that it does open the door for Quentin Martin. The downfall of it is that could burn his red shirt. Now, he still has 3 other games really to go. But that depth at running back is tough because you do have 2 workhorses in Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen. But Quentin Martin is pretty good. He's obviously highly skilled. He looked pretty good in his limited action. Prabula played almost the entire second half. To me, the Prabula stuff is, I think, solely to keep him happy and keep him at Penn State.
100%.
Because they don't need it. In years past, maybe they have needed it, and it's been the same situation. Like Will Levis, right? That was to keep Levis happy.
Stevens.
Tommy Stevens, that was to keep Tommy Stevens happy. The only time it didn't really happen was with Christian Hackenberg. And then Trace comes in the Tex Slayer Bowl, and the rest is history. But, they just got to – it's time for that next man up. Illinois comes in to Beaver Stadium as a primetime game. At number 19, Penn State's now number 9 after moving up. With all the things that went on throughout college football. We're going to talk about that in the third segment. But, as far as that goes, Penn State handled their business. Yeah, there's going to be bumps, bruises, and all that stuff along the way. But they've managed to not have too many key players go down with injuries. And obviously, the biggest one of the day was Devin Cargman, Kent State's quarterback, who broke his leg, who broke his femur. So, I mean, that's one of those situations where it you hate to see it. It is the second play of the game, and it's just super unfortunate. But the good thing for Penn State is that they're not quite in a situation like that. Kent State had 2 quarterbacks that got hurt yesterday, which wasn't great. But, again, for Penn State, it's all about the next man up and seeing what's next for them moving forward.
Yeah, I agree. Illinois is going to be massive game this weekend. You mentioned it, 7:30 p.m. on NBC. They had a big game against Nebraska. got the job done. I wouldn't say they handled business. They got the job done. Big for Penn State to get another ranked team on the schedule. That's Jarrod. You and I mentioned it on the pregame. If you're a Penn State fan, you need Illinois to be undefeated coming into this game. You need Illinois to stay ranked. And here we are, Illinois, number 19 team in the country coming into Happy Valley. So big for the program. Gives you a nice barometer game. How well do you handle business against a team who has looked good for Penn State? So.
Yeah, and this is the type of game that Penn State really hasn't had the opportunity to play a lot in the past few years, because 2022-23, you were either playing a team that you were way superior to and expected to blow out, and often did blow out, your, Rutgers, your Maryland's, Illinois before they improved themselves, Northwestern, that ilk, or you were playing Michigan or Ohio State, two of the very best teams in college football. There was no middle ground, and that 19 ranking, I think, is a good middle ground and a good opportunity for Penn State to play a team that it can beat, it should beat, but can also impress people by beating. At Penn State, the spread currently is 18, I believe. If they win that game by 18 points, that's impressive. That'll open some eyes. It's not going to have people pegging Penn State to win the Big Ten or national title or anything like that, but it's definitely a way for Penn State to kind of prove itself that it can take care of business against teams that aren't the Kent States of the world. It can play a well-coached team that's playing pretty good football and get the job done. So Penn State, I think we're going to learn a lot Saturday against Illinois, and it's a good type of test that Penn State hasn't had in the past few years. That kind of middle ground, that not a pushover, but not the best of the best either. So,
yeah, and Penn State handled business in Champaign last year, obviously in 2021, in a game that set college football back 20 years. That really wasn't the case with the 95 overtime game. But again, Penn State just got to handle business and do what they need to do. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what went on to make Illinois the number 19 ranked team in the country when we come back for the third and final segment of the Lashing Out podcast on the Nittany Sports Now Network. Welcome back to the third and final segment of the Lashing Out podcast. My name is Jarrod. They are Kevin and Joe. And it's time to talk college football around the country, not just in Happy Valley, where obviously Penn State beat Kent State rather easily, but there was certainly football around the rest of the country. We're going to start with Illinois and Nebraska. Illinois and Nebraska played a football game, obviously, at Nebraska in Lincoln. And in overtime, it was the single worst overtime possession I think I've ever seen by Nebraska and Patrick Mahomes Jr. I mean, Dylan Raiola. They ended up at one point with a 3rd and 42, and they ended up losing enough yards where they were in their own territory when it was all said and done. And it was just such a horrific display of football. And, of course, Illinois escapes with the victory. Matt Rule's Nebraska team goes down in infamy. And now Illinois is the number 19 ranked team coming into Beaver Stadium on Saturday.
Yeah, Nebraska misses a 39-yard field goal that would have staved off having to even go to overtime. Yeah, big. I mean, it stinks for Nebraska because they were at home. I think if you're a Nebraska fan, you're really hoping to get that home ranked win. They did hit. They did break the streak. They have a 400 game sellout streak, and they had won every 50. So they won 50, 100, 150, 200, etc. So that streak did get broken. But Dylan Raiola, he's, for a true freshman, the guy graduated high school in June last year. Like, that 24 of 35 for 297, 3 touchdowns and an interception. Man, that guy looks like the truth out there. If I'm a Nebraska fan, I am pumped, because Matt Rule's program, you get a guy like Dylan Raiola, you get the number one recruit in the country. He comes in, balls out with a roster that went 5-7 last year, and maybe takes him 7 or 8 wins this year, and then you build the recruiting class for next year coming in, and the talent pool is just going to get better. So, tough loss for Nebraska, but they're definitely on the upside of the mountain. I think finally, it's good to see. College football is better when Nebraska's good.
Yeah, and that's well said, Kevin. And Dylan Raiola's brother, Dayton Raiola, actually committed to Nebraska on the day of this recording, and a lot of people are joking and wondering if he's gonna emulate Jackson Mahomes the way that Dylan has emulated has emulated Patrick Mahomes. But all joking aside, Nebraska's still learning how to win, right? And I think that was the first time that Nebraska really had a lot of eyes on it. And what I mean by that is, yeah, they played a big primetime game against Colorado, but in terms of pregame hype and buildup, every Colorado game is Colorado versus Colorado. That's the team people are talking about. That's the team people are either loving or hating. And whoever Colorado's playing, it could be Alabama playing Colorado, and that team would almost be an afterthought. And I think Nebraska was kind of the other team in that game. But here you got a ranked Big Ten team. I know it's not a big brand like Michigan or Ohio State, but still, it's a ranked Big Ten team coming in on a Friday night where there were other games going on, but people were more likely to have been watching Nebraska, Illinois on a Friday night than they would have been on a Saturday. And it was a big pressure situation for Nebraska, and they didn't get it done. And that's going to happen when you're building a program. Raiola made some mistakes. He missed a touchdown throw late in the game that probably would have changed the outcome. But as you said, Kevin, the guy's good. He's definitely proven himself worthy of winning that starting job, and he's just going to keep getting better and better. And that's going to be an exciting matchup next season when Nebraska comes to Beaver Stadium. But talking about 2024, Illinois kind of took advantage, I think, of a team that's learning how to win. Penn State knows how to win. And I think next Saturday, obviously, is going to be a much bigger test for Illinois. Not to diminish what they did, getting an impressive road win at Nebraska, but this is Illinois' biggest test of the season to this point thus far. And I think the same goes for Penn State.
Keeping it in the Big Ten, USC got their welcome to the Big Ten moment against Michigan in a game that featured not a lot of passing. Go figure for Sharon Moore and the Wolverines. They obviously lost that one 27-24. UCLA got thumped by LSU. Clemson went in hard against NC State. Miami struggled, or Miami of Ohio lost to Notre Dame, where Notre Dame and the Fighting Irish struggled once again offensively at times. Buffalo beat Northern Illinois in overtime. Northern Illinois, obviously the victors over Notre Dame just a few weeks ago. Utah beat Oklahoma State by 3, which is a big game for the Utes. And then that's right.
Utah feels like a fake number 12 team there. Isaac Wilson, as long as Cam Rising's out, I'm going to call Utah a fake number 12 team because I think Oklahoma State, I'm going to guess, if I'm calling Utah fake at 12, I got to call Oklahoma State at 14 fake. Isaac Wilson is now their quarterback for Utah, true freshman, 5 touchdowns, 5 interceptions on the year. As a true freshman, it's only his second career start, and he's already thrown 5 interceptions. I think he threw 2 interceptions week 1, and he went 7 for 11. So it's a real fire and ice situation over there in Utah. Something to look out for is another ranked team who's probably we're still figuring this thing out. We're still figuring out who's where, who's who, and what's
Cam
what.
Rising, he's 29 years old, 42. He's been around a while, so.
Is that the biggest age discrepancy between a starting quarterback and his backup in the country? I'd be interested to see.
It's got to be.
See that.
Otherwise, JMU going down to Chapel Hill and putting up a 70 burger on the Tar Heels. That's That's a big ass number for a new to FBS program, James Madison, versus an ACC squad. There, that's a tough look.
That's pretty embarrassing for the Tar Heels and Mac Brown. Luckily, Carolina's a basketball school. That's a basketball number. But yeah, that was bad. The ACC had a very, very weird Saturday afternoon. Obviously, Pitt handled business against Youngstown State. They put up 73.
Good on them.
Yeah, 73-17. Duke handled Middle Tennessee State. Virginia Tech lost to Rutgers with one of the worst safeties I've ever seen for Rutgers. Just phenomenal. Miami thumped South Florida. Florida State took down ACC brethren Cal. And Boston
By a score
College
of 14-9.
They stink.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you for vindicating me. Go ahead.
And Boston College took down Michigan State. A bunch of fighters.
I gotta look at their schedule before I say.
Now, we mentioned Florida State in jest because there's a guy that I think was supposed to eat some dog crap. And the cool thing to do on Twitter now is to say you're going to do this if your team loses. And I would encourage nobody from Penn State to ever say anything like that. But for Kansas State and Brigham Young University, BYU, the Mighty Mormons in Provo, Utah, a fake Bill Snyder fan account suggested shoving his 5-layer cheesy burrito where the sun doesn't shine if Kansas State lost to BYU. And of course, the chocolate milk was pouring in Provo. BYU beat them 38-9.
Mega number. I want to go.
Which made for the single greatest tweet. Sorry, Kevin. The single greatest tweet BYU will ever tweet. The Liv Moss tweet after their victory will go down. Should hang it in the Louvre. The Twitter Hall of Fame, the X Hall of Fame. Great moment to be a Cougar in Provo, Utah.
Liv Moss. Hopefully there was an earthquake in Utah last night. I want to go back to Boston College real quick. I think Boston College is going to end the season ranked. I think I think that's a good squad, and shout out to OB right there. They've got one ranked matchup against Louisville, Syracuse, SMU, UNC. We know is bad. Pitt to end the season could be tough for them. If Pitt, no, never mind. That's the end of the season. That's when Narduzzi stinks. Unless you're going to fake slide the championship game. But yeah, I think Boston College, man, credit to Bill O.B. And then Tennessee going into Oklahoma. Jackson Arnold struggled for Oklahoma. Oklahoma's offense isn't fantastic, but Tennessee did a real defense for once and only put up 25 points. So gritty game. Managed 5 field goals after the first quarter for offense. So Tennessee's another number 6 team. That's one to watch. I'm not sure how valid that ranking is. A lot of SEC there. And then Missouri, Vanderbilt. Missouri only wins by a field goal and drops in the rankings. So another
no love for Vandy. No love for Vandy. It's a shame. They played a really good season so far. Obviously beating Virginia Tech.
To Christian Veillere and Georgia State on the road. That was a tough look for Vandy.
Yes, and I have to send a shout out to my beloved Boise State. They handle business. Alshon Jeanty is still a stud. One of the top ranked Heisman winner or top Heisman front runners, in my opinion. If I had a vote, he would certainly get it. Now we do have to. I think before we go, we have to talk about the end of the Baylor Colorado game. Because there are a multitude of different layers that we can talk about, and they're all significant because it's just absolutely insanity. So the fact that Baylor had 0 safety help over the top because they doubled Travis Hunter late in the game after a timeout, gave up the game-tying touchdown. Then Travis Hunter forces a fumble to win the game in overtime. And then, for whatever reason, Colorado's fans decided it'd be a good idea to storm the field for a win against the Bears.
Yeah, first, I mean, you can't give up the Hail Mary there. It's a very poor ball, barely even gets to the goal line. Can't give that up. Travis Hunter went in he went in no arms. All you have to do is not fumble there because he wasn't actually going to tackle. He went in for a hit, luckily laid his shoulder on the ball. And yeah, dude, storming the field. Now, Colorado does it after every home win or whatever. Clemson does that too. And I find storming the field after every home game to me is just a weird concept. Like storming the field should be for if you were unranked taking down a top 5 opponent. Like that's where that is. I'm not trying to gatekeep. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, don't Clemson fans deny that it's storming the field, or it's like, oh no, we're just meeting at the logo? Like, don't they try to rationalize it in like some kind of weird way?
I don't care what you call it. It's storming the field. Yes, they do call it the meeting at the logo, but I think it's the dumbest thing ever. And that should be reserved for, I'm not trying to gatekeep that. That's reserved for unranked team beating ranked number 5, top 5 opponents. Like Penn State in the kick 6 against Ohio State. That's a justifiable field storming. When UNC's the number 1 ranked team in the country and they go on the road and lose to Georgia Tech in Atlanta, you know, that's worthy of the court storming in basketball. But just don't do it after every game. You barely squeak by Baylor, who's been bottom dwelling in the Big 12 for the last 3 or 5 years. It's just Baylor won 3 games last year. It's just ugh. Oh well.
Coach Prime, baby. It's all about the clicks, man. It's a great time to be in Colorado. I will say this about Oklahoma. If they had this type of defense at any point with Lincoln Riley, they win a couple national title games.
Yeah, but Brent Venables is there now. He's a defensive guy and actually knows defense.
Who would have thought we'd ever say that Oklahoma's offense and quarterback were what was holding it back? That would have been thought of as a bizarro land just a few years ago.
And that is why college football is the greatest. Joe, any parting shots?
Yeah. Just one more kind of takeaway from Penn State's win over Kent State. Drew Allar has just been, I think, absolutely fantastic this season. And I know we talk about Drew Allar a lot. We will talk about him a lot for good or bad on every single episode of the Lasching Out podcast. But he was great against West Virginia, even though he only threw 17 passes. Against Bowling Green, he's the reason they won that game, really, because the defense for one reason or another wasn't on in the first half. And if Drew Allar doesn't bring his A game, Penn State could very well have lost to Bowling Green. And then obviously Kent State is Kent State, but he eclipsed 300 yards, which he had only done once before, and he had only done that against the Big 12 defense in his very first start, which was more than a year ago. So I think you're just seeing a different player in Drew Allar. You're seeing him obviously in a better scheme. You're seeing him run the ball a lot more, which I think is a testament to what he's done to improve his body over the offseason. And you're seeing a more confident guy. The stiff arm against West Virginia and Allar's reaction after, that's no small thing, I don't think. I think that really shows how much Drew Allar has matured as a leader and how much, I guess, moxie he really has now. So I just think 15 has been absolutely outstanding through 3 games, and I'm excited to see what he can do against what's a pretty good Illinois defense in prime time next week.
Kevin?
No, I'm good this week. I had a great weekend, County, and in the U.S. Mid-Am. My guy just missed the cut, had a tough final couple holes there for us. Was really hopeful, had a great time. So I'm gonna be positive this week. I got no qualms. I just got to walk 4 days on the golf course. That was awesome.
Must be nice. Joe, I couldn't agree more. Drew Allar has been a much different player this year, and I think that's great. Kevin, it's clearly your fault that your player did not do well enough. You need to step your thing. You got to step your game up. With that said, we'll be back later this week to talk more Penn State football and to preview the game with the Fighting Illini. It's being played at 7:30 on Peacock and NBC. Big Ten Saturday night. Gotta love it. Primetime at Beaver Stadium. Nothing quite beats it. For Joe Smeltzer and Kevin Quigley, this has been Jarrod Prugar on the Lasching Out podcast on the Nittany Sports Now Network.